What's up, everybody? Chris Hervochon here with another episode of Accounting for Marketing, the show that combines the disciplines of accounting and marketing. Today, I've got a very special guest, John Garuti from Digital Acquisitions, and he is a broker for a digital agency broker. So in other words, what they do is they help agency owners buy other agencies or sell their own agency. And I think you're going to find this episode really valuable because he talks about how you can build value in your agency. What are some of the things that other agencies are going to look for when they go to acquire you? When you should start planning, who should be on your team to help you get through that process. So I think you're going to find this episode really valuable. And without further ado, let's get into it. So what's up, John? How's everything going?
Everything's great. Just living the dream.
Awesome. You want to tell the folks a little bit about yourself and what you do and how you got started?
Yeah, it's a long-winded story, so I'll try to make it short. But I am a digital business broker. I work with the company Digital Acquisitions. So we're focused on agencies, e-commerce, and SaaS businesses. We help those owners sell their business. So we go out and just try to do our best to get them the best price possible based on what the market's willing to pay for their business. And how I got started, I actually grew up in a family manufacturing business. I worked in all areas of the business, and eventually in November 2017, we sold the business to a large global competitor. And so going through the M&A process myself, I don't know, I kind of fancied it. I liked it. And it was a great intro for me. And then I worked for the acquirer for a year. And during that time, I realized I didn't want to stay. And I was considering buying a digital business. And that's actually how I met the guys at Digital Acquisitions. And from there, I was curious and asked them what brokering's like, because I had thought about it previously and we chatted, and here I am today.
How about that? So what was kind of driving that want to get into the digital world from manufacturing, out of curiosity?
Right. Yeah, it's a big shift. I think I just, for me, when I was working in manufacturing, it's going to the same spot every day, working with tons of employees. I mean, we had 40 employees, and of course, managing people's tough.
Yep.
And then additionally, you have manufacturing. It's very competitive. I was working in cement manufacturing, which is a very commoditized industry. So it's all about economies of scale. That's actually one of the big reasons we chose to sold, is because we were a small regional manufacturer versus the big guys out there are these big global conglomerates, right, that do billions of dollars. And so we got out at the right time. And then for me, when I look at digital businesses, you can run them remotely, you can run them from your house, and all those things are attractive for me in terms of work-life balance. I was sick of driving 2 hours every day to and from work, and having all that time back is just incredible. So
Yeah, the rat race, right?
Oh yeah.
Yep. And where are you located?
So I'm living down in Naples, Florida now.
Awesome. Originally from Naples?
No, I'm originally from New York City. I was born and raised in Queens, and that's where I lived and worked up until I moved down here November of 2018.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm from New Jersey and living in South Carolina, so I can relate to the migration.
Yes, sir.
So how big is your team at your brokerage?
Yeah, so there's the two partners of the firm that started Digital Acquisitions, and then we have 4 brokers, including myself, and we have a research team of two people, maybe 3. And so we're all over the U.S. We all work remotely, living that digital lifestyle, which is fitting. We even have a team over in the U.K., so we cover all of North America and Europe.
Wow. Do you guys have a niche that you typically specialize in? Obviously, I mean, you're all over the globe, but, is there a particular niche, typical type of agency that you like to work with?
Not exactly. I would say we work with any agency. It's just for us, we're a bit higher end, so we don't take on a customer unless we feel their sale price is going to be at least at $500,000 or more.
Hmm.
Most of our deals are over $1 million, and we can do ourselves. We can do deals up to $10 million, and if we have to escalate, we actually are partnered with an investment bank as well. So we can potentially do deals up to $250 million if need
Wow.
be.
Wow. That's pretty crazy. I mean, those are decent sized agencies for sure. Uh,
Yes, absolutely.
so I want to dive into the process a little bit. And I guess where we can start is, how do agencies find you? What prompts them to, come search you out? And then how do they ultimately find you?
Yeah, so I mean, we're on the web, we're on LinkedIn. Why you want to talk to me is because I can tell you what your business is worth today, and I think that's the message I want to shoot to your clients here, is that life gets in the way, and what happens is lots of business owners, when they go to sell their business, they're unprepared, and when they're unprepared, you're not going to get the value for the business that you want. Okay, this is like anything. If you want to exit your business one day with a great sale price, great terms, you need to start preparing. So whether you're thinking about selling 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, let's chat today. Let's start preparing. Let me give you some insights on what another buyer will find very valuable in your business, and you can start working on that slowly over time, because the other thing is life gets in the way. You never know when you might have to just up and sell the business. So I think the more prepared you are today, the better you're going to fare down the road when that time comes.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something that, in my business, in the CPA world, we see that all the time, right? Everybody's trying to figure out, how to make cash flow good tomorrow, as opposed to, what's this going to look like when you go to retire, when you go to exit, you want to go do something else.
Right.
There's a lot of foresight that needs to go into that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So, an agency comes to you and says, "Hey, look, I want to know what my business is worth. I'm thinking about exiting at some point." What does that courtship process look like? How long does that typically take? What are you kind of seeing now in the market?
Yeah, so if you're ready to sell your business today, and we sit down, I'm going to want to understand your business. So I will want to see the last 3 years of your P&L, and I would like to see the last year, month over month, what that looks like, just because I'm trying to gauge if there's any trends in your business. I mean, usually agencies, they're typically pretty level, right? So I
Yeah.
want to see, I just want to see the financial performance of the business, number one. And why I want to see 3 years is because any buyer is going to value your business based on your last 3 years performance. They want to know if you're growing, if you're level, if you're declining. I want to understand your employees, how many you have, what each of them do. I want to know, in terms of those employees, like how much do you rely on each of them? And especially as the owner, this is very important. The less the business relies on you, the more valuable it is for another buyer. And so the way to do that is, and this is another thing I'm going to inquire, do you have systems in place? Do you have structure? Do you have a manual? Can you give me a manual on how to operate your entire business? And the ultimate litmus test is, like, if you had an emergency and couldn't work on the business for 2 weeks for some reason, like, is it still going to run? Is everything going to go smoothly? Are you going to lose customers, or do you not even have to worry? Like, that's a great litmus test that anybody should ask themselves that owns a business.
So, out of curiosity, of the agencies that come to you, how many of them, when you say, "Hey, can you give me a manual," can give you a manual?
Zero. Most people, they don't do these things. They don't think of them, and that's why I'm so gung ho on saying, let's meet now. I don't care if you're not even thinking of selling. Let's meet now, because these are the things you need to start doing. And the other thing I want to understand too is your marketing and your client acquisition. How are you getting customers, clients? How much how much does it cost for you to acquire those clients? What sort of channels? The more channels you have, the better, right? So for example, if you're doing paid, maybe some paid acquisition, great. But are you adding some organic acquisition. Maybe you're doing content marketing, blogging, referrals. The more acquisition channels you have, the better. I don't want to see an over-reliance on any one thing when it comes to marketing, because that's too risky. All these things, what a buyer is looking for is risk, or that's what they're basing your business on. So the things we can start implementing that will make your business less riskier, ultimately will get you a better dollar. So in terms of clients, also, I want to know those acquisition channels. I want to know the lifetime value of a client, and what's your average client length? How long do they stay with you? Okay, if your client stays with you for 2 months on average, like, that's not attractive. But if you have clients that are staying with you for a year, 18 months, 2 years, longer, like, the better average length of a client, the more value that'll be for another buyer.
Yeah, and there's a lot to unpack there. So I'm really excited about this. But let's start with the internal marketing. And this is something that I asked actually my last guest on the show about. If one channel is bad, how many channels is good, or how many channels do you want to see? I'm assuming that 50 channels is probably too many too, because that's going to be indicative of, an agency that's just not focused. So
Right.
Where's that sweet spot, do you think?
Yeah, I'd say at least 3 channels. I never want to see more than one channel acquiring 50% of your new business. Once you go above 50% per channel, it devalues your business. So I think 3 to 4, 5, 50, it's crazy. I mean, ultimately, I think if I don't know if 50 channels even exist, right? But
probably not.
yeah, I'd say 4 to 5 is a good range. Again, it's just I want to see, I want to see those channels having equal weight, right? Equal distribution. So that's the big thing.
That's good insight. And so in the context of maybe social media marketing, do you consider social media as one channel, or would you consider LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram as 3 channels? How would you kind of count that?
Yeah, I mean, I think they could be looked at as individual channels. But then what are you doing? Is it just organic where you're bringing those clients in? I would probably look at it more as like organic, where maybe you're doing the content marketing and whatnot, or SEO, and people are coming in that way. The big channels, are paid, organic.
Right.
You have referrals, influencer. I'm not sure if agencies use really any influencer marketing, but
so would you say maybe a good mix would be organic social plus referrals from existing clients and friends, plus, say, organic website based on content, blog, like that?
And the other thing for agencies is outbound. Are you going out and hunting and maybe doing cold email, maybe soliciting people on LinkedIn? So plenty of channels. It's just, again, each channel has its own risk, right?
Oh yeah.
So like paid advertising, you can't control Google and Facebook ad pricing. That stuff is always going up and continuing to go up. And so you got to think of that as a buyer. A buyer could come in and those costs are low, but those could change at any time, right? A competitor could come in and start competing on certain keywords, or I mean, there's plenty of examples. So that's why you want to have as many channels as possible. Same thing even goes for SEO, right? I mean, the saying is you're always like one Google algorithm update from not ranking.
It's so true too. And I made a list here of all the things that you've said in the last 10 minutes, as I find it just so fascinating. But the other piece is processes. So we talked about having a manual, which is documentation. But how many agencies are you finding have, let's just say, good processes in place to where they have that well-oiled machine internally? They are efficient. They are creating synergy within their own business.
Right. I think many of them have processes. They're just not written down. And that's the problem. You need them written down. I think it can help you with training as you grow and scale. That's one reason to have it. And number 2, it's more going to come down to when you want to sell the business, that transition plan.
Right.
People, when they sell, they want to transition out. Normally digital businesses, you can transition away in 2-3 months, maybe 6 months. All depends on the size, but the less you have written down, documented, the more that new buyer is going to be calling you up and saying, hey Chris, how do you do this and how do you do that, or what's your thoughts on this, right? So this is all part of transitioning and making that process smoother for the owner.
Right. And what does a good documentation process look like from your perspective? Is it something that's in some sort of a database internally? Is it literally a written manual that's sitting on a shelf somewhere? What does that look like?
Yeah, I don't even think it needs to be complex. I mean, just having a Google document where, and maybe you have what's that, like the beginning of a book is
Table of contents.
Yeah, you have a table
Yeah.
of contents on all the various aspects of your business, and you want everything. If you do something more than twice per week, or any activity you do more than twice, you should have it written down how to do it.
That's good insight right there. Going to change topics just a little bit, but you also mentioned lifetime value of a client and client duration. So kind of an offshoot of that. And one of the things that I see agencies struggle with is actually getting down to client profitability. Is that something that you look at? Is that something that agencies are doing well? And what kind of an impact would that have on the value of your business? If you have some clients who are profitable, some who aren't profitable, some who are more profitable than others, what's your insight there?
Yeah, so this goes back to one of the value drivers of a business, which is everybody should check this guy out. It's called Built to Sell. I forget his name, Mike Warlow. Yeah, so he has 8 value drivers of a business, and one of them is called the Switzerland structure. So we already started getting into this with employees. You don't want over-reliance on any one employee in your business, and same thing, you don't want over-reliance of any one customer in your business.
Mm-hmm.
So the more customers, the better. The more profitability spread out through those customers, the better, right? It's that, if you have a small customer concentration, that's not good. You don't want to see one customer being, 30, 40, 50% of your revenue. That's very risky, because you lose that customer, you lose half your business. So it's just the more the better. You want more customers, and I think tracking that profitability per customer is a great thing. I don't see a lot of companies doing that. I would get that detailed and granular, because that's, as a business owner, you should want to know where your efforts are going and what results they're bringing.
Sure. One of the things I see with the agencies I work with is it's hard to get down to that client profitability for them, or that's something that they haven't done in the past. That's always something that I try to move toward. And then the other piece of that is it helps you to niche. So if you don't know, you know what industries your clients are in, right? If you haven't niched and you're thinking about niching, but you need to determine which industries and niches are most profitable. And the only way to do that is to actually figure out which clients are most profitable. And that's not just a top line number. That's getting all the way down to what your net is on that particular client. And that's something that I see agencies struggle with all the time. Cool. So how about some key trends that you're seeing right now in the space overall? What's changing? What's different?
Yeah, the big thing right now is, in the current market we're in, there's a lot of cash on hand. So a lot of agencies are buying agencies, doing roll-ups. They want the clients, they want the revenue, and they also want the talent. Aqua hiring is pretty big with a lot of the deals we've seen lately. So that's one big trend. Right now is a really good time to sell, because there's just a lot of buyers out there. I think, there's a lot of recession talk right now. I think in a year or 2 years from now, if that does happen, there's probably not going to be as many agencies eager to buy.
Sure.
So that's what I see right now going on.
Sure. And then how about multiples? What's kind of the range that you're seeing? What's the higher end? What's the lower end?
Yeah, so multiples can be tricky, because so many things factor in. Your growth is probably the heaviest influencer of your multiple.
And so when we talk about growth, do we mean top line growth? Do we mean bottom line growth? Do we mean EBITDA? Do we mean cash flow? What do we mean?
All those things. You want growth all in all those areas. So growth is big. And then again, going back to those contracts and those customers, more customers, lower acquisition costs, greater lifetime value, all those things increase the multiple. So what we're seeing right now is if you've got a solid business with 4, 5, 6 employees, and as the owner, you're not super involved, you're working on the business, not in it. We just did a sale around, I think it was, the company was producing 400K EBITDA, so they got a 3.2 times multiple.
Okay.
So if you're under $500,000, I mean, probably around a 3, and what can push it above a 3 versus below a 3 is all those things we just spoke about.
Right.
All those drivers.
You would say 3 is around the average for an agency that size.
Yeah. 3 and just under a 3, and having for valuations, having a clear focus is important for your agency. If you're everything to everyone, not so valuable. If you're very focused on a segment, I don't know, maybe you're focused on real estate. A larger real estate firm would be more apt to buy you, right? Or a larger agency that focuses on that, or you should focus on only B2B SaaS or startups, something like that. If you're playing in all these different areas, that's not so good. That will probably make it harder harder to get the sale done.
Right. So would you say, from an acquirer's perspective, if you were a generalist, you're more likely to be acquired by some sort of other agency, but if you're a niched agency, it's possible that you broaden your horizons. You could be acquired by, like what you just said, like a real estate company or somebody who's trying to bring their marketing in-house.
Yeah, no, sorry. When I said that a real estate company, I meant a larger agency that focused on real estate. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But listen, there's plenty of other buyers out there. I mean, if you're going to sell under $1 million, I mean, there's lots of entrepreneurs out there who can go get an SBA loan and are interested in these types of businesses. So, I think once you start scaling above 2 million and 3 million sales price, that's when that, those standalone entrepreneur buyers go away. And that's where you got to go find a larger firm, a larger agency, or possibly even some sort of private equity firm or fund.
Right. Right. So if I'm a buyer and I come to you and I say, hey, John, I'm looking to buy an agency. I've never done this before. First time. What are some of the due diligence questions that you would tell me that I need to ask, and some of the things that I need to look for when I'm kind of, evaluating whether or not I want to go and purchase a particular agency?
Yeah. So the first place I would start is, number one, a self-assessment. Are you sure you know how to run an agency? It's like any business, and when you look at an opportunity, you got to understand what the gap is. You've got a skill set. It takes a certain skill set to run any sort of business. What's that gap? And so when I go and do the analysis, does that agency, with the resources that are available that would transfer to me as the new owner, will that gap be filled or not?
Right.
Right. So I always tell people, start with yourself. Know what you're doing before you get into it, because I trust me, I have horror stories of people buying, e-commerce businesses and the thing going downhill a year later and they're out of business already.
Uh-huh.
Start with yourself. But yeah, in terms of, if I was analyzing an agency, I would go right into the processes and the structure, who's running what's the reporting like, who's in charge, and really getting with that owner. And, I really want to understand their involvement. If they're just getting reports from the managers and the business is running seamlessly, then I'd be way more interested there, versus if the owner, he's actually writing writing the advertisements and doing the lead gen himself, then, I wouldn't be as interested. But again, value is in the eye of the beholder. So maybe you might find, but as a someone interested in the agency, you might find some value there, saying, "Oh, I know I can do these things, right? So, okay, I'm confident I can replace the owner
Right.
and his skill set." So yeah, I want to really understand the whole hierarchy with the employees, and then get really into the finances. And then the big thing is, can you verify everything that they're presenting to you, right? So you're gonna, when you look at a business for sale through a brokerage, you're gonna view a SIM, a confidential information memorandum. So you're gonna see the last 3 years history, the month over month trailing 12. Can you go into that? Can you verify everything that's going on there? That's when you get into due diligence, that's what you need to check. You need to check all those. Can they, can they prove everything that they're showing you in that balance sheet? And so that's where you got to come in, Chris, and make sure these agencies can verify every single thing that they're communicating in their profit and loss statements.
That's right. Do you actually recommend that a buyer go and get an external audit on the target company?
Yes, if you don't know what you're doing, there are companies out there that perform due diligence checks. I think a good accountant would know what to do as well. So I absolutely, if this is the first time buying a business, I think you should get that help and support.
That's a good point. That kind of segues into my next question. But what kind of team should you have around you? You mentioned accounting, obviously, a broker such as yourself. But who are the other players that you would recommend bringing on if you're looking to go buy an agency, or if you're looking to sell your agency, and when should you bring them on?
Yeah. So, well, I think let's talk about selling. I mean, if you own an agency, I think everybody should have an accountant, or, and a tax professional. It might be the same person. This is a big challenge I've run into. I've been selling an e-commerce business, and the owner does his own accounting.
Oh
Doesn't
boy.
have, yeah. And so you can imagine the buyers are very skeptical and are like, oh, I've had buyers just walk away from the table once they heard that, because they're like, um, not that we're accusing you of anything, but you do your own accounting. Like, how can I verify that, right?
Yeah.
Makes it much harder, and it's just, you're going to put up this like wall of mistrust. So you should have a good accountant who's reviewing your books, and I think actively involved with your business. And of course, it depends how big your business is. I think, you're working with agencies like with maybe 10 employees and under.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So of
Exactly.
course, as you grow into a larger business, you're most likely going to have your own in-house accounting. But I think even then, it's still good to have that third-party check as a business owner, right? You want to make sure your in-house accountants know what they're doing, right?
Right. So let's just say, just for fun, agency owner does his own accounting or her own accounting. Buyer comes in and says, I don't know about all this. Do you think that getting an external audit, like an actual audit, providing an audit report in that case would be helpful, not so much, or is that something that you would recommend, or maybe not?
I think it'd be helpful, but then, the question is going to be, who pays for that? Does the buyer pay for that, or
Right.
does the seller pay for that? Now,
Right.
the buyer, it's incumbent on him to do that during due diligence, but a buyer may not be willing to submit an LOI and get to that due diligence phase without a third-party verification.
Right. So what I'm hearing is that you really should have some sort of accounting processes and accounting personnel in place, whether internal or external, throughout your entire process.
Yes.
Throughout your existence, whether or not you're buying or selling the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great takeaway. Well, I mean, coming from the CPA, right? All right, cool. So what are some of the current trends you're seeing as far as financing deals? I know you mentioned SBA loans, and you mentioned, having investment bankers and stuff like that involved on larger scale deals. But,
Right.
you mentioned that the amount of cash is sitting out there in the market is large. But so are you seeing a lot of financing? Not so much. What are some of the trends happen?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the deal size. The lower, 2 million and under, there's plenty of people out there that can do SBA loans. Even a larger business can potentially take out an SBA loan. So the big thing with SBA is, you're going to need some sort of collateral or guarantee. So what I tell people, if you're very interested in buying, like go and get pre-approved by an SBA lender. Like, don't wait. Go out today, see what you can get approved for, so that way what you're working with, right? Because a broker, like, I'm going to ask you at a certain point to verify your funds, right? So that means I'm going to need a letter from your bank, or if you're working with an investor or something like that. I need some form of proof that you can purchase this business.
Right.
And as you go up, once you start getting over like 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, I wouldn't even let you submit an LOI until I get that proof of verification. Under 1 million, we might get to that LOI phase, but again, as a broker, I want to see that. And I think as a buyer, you should know, because you not only need the capital to purchase the business, but then you need working capital as well.
For sure.
Right. And so you should, going back to due diligence and analyzing a deal, right? You should also ask for cash flow statements, or at least get an understanding of how much cash that owner likes to have on hand at all times to keep the operations running seamlessly. And to be honest, I personally feel like if you need a minimum of 6 months of free cash at hand if you're going to buy a business, because you're buying a business to potentially improve it and get a return, right? So you need to have that money readily at hand to start working in it and growing the business.
Yeah, for sure. That 6 months sounds like a really good metric. From an agency who's going to be acquired, from an operating perspective, what sort of cash do you like to see on hand? And do you find that most agency owners have a good idea of how much cash they should have on hand at any given point?
Well, I think the owners know. I mean, because most agencies, right, they're living and dying by cash flow, and so, right, the owners, they know what they need to have. If they're smart, if they're successful, they know what they need to have, right? I mean, I think this is a challenge a lot of new business owners come into.
Sure, like all of them.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when it comes to scaling and. As you scale, you need more cash on hand. Duh. Some people don't think of these things. So there's that. What was the other question? I'm sorry. On the
how much cash do you like for them to have that you would see? How many, let's just say how many months of either expenses or how many months of revenue on hand for just an agency who's operating, who may be thinking about getting acquired?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of operating, I'd like to see at least 3 months of cash flow on hand at all times. I don't think that really much matters to a buyer. They just want to know really how much cash is needed at all times to keep this business smooth and running.
Right. How about entity structure? So there's a change of topics a little bit. This gets a little bit more into tax, but what kind of structures are the agencies that you're seeing?
Yeah, mostly all of them are LLCs and S corps, taxed as S corps, and I mean, I think in the United States that's the best structure you can have, right? In terms of removing yourself as a person from the business, the liability there, and mostly all the businesses I run to are LLCs with an S corp, and maybe they might be a corporation with an S corp. I think the big difference, if you're going to if you're a big company and you're hiring lots of people, I think there is a point in time where it does make sense to move to a corporation and take it as is. I'm not a tax specialist or whatnot, but.
And then I guess related to that, and that's what I see too, is, all the agencies I work with, they're all S corps or becoming S corps. Well, they're all LLCs, taxes S corps, put it that way. Yeah. Or becoming S corps, taxes S corps. Reasonable compensation is one of the big things that we get into. It's one of the sticky topics because it's just so. I mean, there's no set formula on how to calculate it or what you should be paid as an agency owner operating under an S corp. So I'm wondering what your experience has been with buyers and sellers kind of navigating that issue, how often it comes up in the due diligence process and stuff like that.
Yeah, so reasonable, I don't think a buyer looks at it as reasonable compensation. They want to know how much money is that owner taking out of the business, right? So that's typically if a business is going to sell under $5 million, we want to know what the seller's discretionary earnings is. And this number can get a little tricky if there's multiple owners. If there's one owner, if you're one owner and you've got employees, okay, whatever you're taking out of the business can be SDE. Okay, and that includes your salary if you do, distributions at the end of the year, if you do any personal expenses, like, I don't know, your, meals, maybe you're paying your car off through the business, something like that. So that's seller's discretionary earnings. Where this can get a little fuzzy though is if say you've got a partner and both of you work full time in the business, I can't take both of your salaries and put that under seller's discretionary earnings. It can only be one of you, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's where a broker, typically we can work through this on our own and of course include the accountant as well. But that's really what we need to distill is what's your true discretionary earnings number, and that's where we're going to base the multiple off if you're smaller.
Interesting. Now, how about from an international perspective? And I am not an international tax guy. Yes, I try to stay away from the international stuff. But I'm curious, for somebody who may be listening, who has that type of situation, who maybe is going to be acquired by an international company, what are some of the special considerations there?
Yeah, I mean the big consideration is it's going to have to be a cash deal, or the buyer they're going to have cash or be financed
Really?
by themselves or or they might be able to get something through their bank if they're large and have a good history with the bank. But you can't, so if you're an American and you found an agency in Canada, you can't buy that with an SBA loan. So unless you can have the money yourself, or you can get private investment, or if you have a good relationship with your bank, you might be able to get funded. But that's the big thing when you go international.
Interesting. One of the, and this is, not really related, but one of the things that we run into in the accounting space, I talk a lot about how the accounting firms and marketing agencies, they're kind of the same business, just different services. But what we see a lot in the accounting space is seller financing. And I'm wondering if that's something that's common in the agency space as well.
Yeah, well, that's just common in deal making in general, and why buyers like to see some sort of seller financing. It puts some skin in the game.
Yeah,
So
sure.
most of the deals we do, it's typically 80-90% up front with 10 to 20% coming down after, that transition plan that's agreed upon. Once that's executed, maybe 3 months, 6 months later, that's when the rest of that comes in. And every deal's different. Usually for an agency, it's that transition plan is not as long. So usually that will come pretty fast, like 3 months, 6 months. But when you're talking about e-commerce business and SaaS companies, those and even larger businesses, those that remaining that holdback can come, yeah, a year later, 18 months later, 2 years later. It all depends on the risk, right?
Sure.
That's just a way for a buyer to mitigate risk. And
Sure.
additionally, banks, if for an SBA loan, the banks like to see some of that as well to mitigate their risk.
Sure. Do you see very often that the selling agency owner stays on with the business for some period of time, or are you seeing a lot where it's just, they're at the retirement age and they're, at this point and kind of where we are and, demographically in the US, or are they just kind of exiting and calling it a day?
Yeah, there's always going to be some sort of transition plan. It's deal dependent. So it go, there are situations, yeah, where they stay on, and typically if you're going to stay on for an extended period of time, it'll be like under a contract. Like they'll say, okay, the buying agents, they'll say, we'll give you a contract for a year. But again, it's deal dependent. Every deal is different. and I guess it all depends on the seller, right? Some people, they just want to be out, and some people are looking for a strategic buyer, and they're happy to stay on and work with them because they're bigger and have more resources. So
Sure.
that's deal dependent.
That's awesome. I think this has been super helpful. The conversation's been really good, and you brought up a lot of really great points I think are going to be valuable to the listeners. Anything that I missed that maybe you want to make sure that you cover, or?
Just my main message: don't don't wait to sell your business. Start preparing today. Let's chat. I'm happy to chat with any of your clients or audience. There's no obligation. I don't cost any money to have a nice 30-minute conversation about your business, where it's at. I like to do what's called reverse engineering your exit. So if you want to sell for X down the road, let's figure out where you are now. Let me help you figure out what things you can do to maximize that value, and let me help you set some revenue and earnings targets that are conservative, so that hopefully when that time comes, you can achieve those numbers.
So would it be fair to say maybe like the 5 or so key takeaways are: start a conversation with somebody who knows what they're doing, like you, early,
Sure.
Get the right people in place, get the right processes in place, get a team around you, and then maximize your growth, and then also diversify, also from a client perspective, and from an internal marketing perspective, where your clients are coming from.
Right.
Is that
Definitely.
does that pretty much sum it up?
I like those.
Awesome. So if people want to find you to have that conversation and start that dialogue, where do they find you?
Yeah, you can email me, john.garuti@digitalacquisitions.co. Just put a little note in there that you saw me here on the chat with Chris. You can email me. You can find me on LinkedIn. Shoot me a connection request, and just put a little message in there how you found me, so I know, or else I'll probably ignore you. and, and yeah, I'm very open and happy to chat at any time. So just come knock on my door, and happy to be of service.
That's awesome. John, we appreciate your time, and thanks for being on the show today.
All right. Thank you, Chris. It was a pleasure.
Likewise.